Greetings, Corpse Club, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for DailyDead.com. My name is Heather Wixson, and this week we are going to be getting geeky about all things Saw and Spiral. And I am joined by my fellow geek in arms when it comes to the Saw movies, Brian Collins. I am really excited to have you here. It's funny because I kind of, when I first moved out here, because I've known you pretty much since I've moved out here, and I kind of thought I was the only person who got nerdy about these movies. And then I met my Brian, and then we were kind of geeking out about things, and then we were like, oh, Brian Collins is like totally into this stuff too. So it's funny. It's nice to see there's other people out there, but I feel like, I don't know, being geeky about Saw like 10 years ago wasn't exactly in vogue.
Yeah. It was, everybody just had that weird attitude about the quote unquote term they used that I did not, torture porn stuff. And, the people that were into it were weirdos. And yeah. And you still see some of that, I think. And it's just never made much sense to me, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, which I want to talk about too, because I noticed when I was going through some reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, I probably saw the words torture porn, which is probably my least favorite term that gets thrown around these days, because I frankly don't think it actually is a thing. But I saw it still be like probably at least in 7 or 8 different reviews for Spiral, which to me was just the dumbest thing ever. But I guess for me, like when somebody like just randomly throws out the term torture porn towards the Saw movies, one, to me, that just means I feel like you're being lazy, and two, you kind of miss the point of the movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a really big fan of that. And I'm just curious. So like, I know when the original came out, like, were you super obsessed with the website? Like back when it first started, were you into all that stuff, or how did you kind of come into Saw?
Actually, I think I must've been at like a, I can't remember if there was still Fangoria or not, but a Weekend of Horrors convention, and I got a preview disc of Saw that I never even watched. It was just sitting there on my desktop. Right? I just assumed it was some other low budget, kind of indie horror movie that would likely maybe sound good on paper, but not hold my interest when I watched it. And I kept it, and I don't know if I ever actually watched it even after I got into it. And I looked for it a couple of years ago. I must have tossed it eventually, but I think it just had like the trailer, maybe like an interview, like like an EPK kind of thing. But I remember just being like, I have no idea what this is. And the only reason I went to see it, besides just a general interest in horror, was a friend of mine really wanted to go. We hadn't hung out for a while, so she was like, I want to go see that Saw movie. I was like, all right, yeah, sure. Whatever. Let's go kill 90 minutes. And then I was like, oh wow, this is actually really freaking good. So, but yeah, it was not. It wasn't like Blair Witch where I was like counting the days down to the movie came out and like starring the website and all that stuff. Like I was all in for that when that was happening. And
yeah, I kind of miss the days of website marketing. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm like older, but like I miss those days of like where you could just spend like a few hours just clicking around on things. And Blair Witch, I think, was like obviously the first one that really, I think, caught a lot of people's imagination. But the Saw one was super fun too. And I remember when it came out, we were having a Halloween party. And I basically was like, I told everybody at like 8:00, I was like, all right, we're going to a 9:15 showing of Saw. Like, if you want to come, cool. If not, get the hell out of my house because we're going. It was like the night before Halloween. So I was famous for sort of like throwing social engagements aside to go see movies. That was sort of my thing that I did back then. But it's funny because I remember when I saw the first Saw. Wow, there's gonna be a lot of Saw in this episode. After seeing that first film, I didn't totally love it. I kind of remember thinking there was some big sort of plot holes that kind of bummed me out. I liked the reveals. I liked the story. I loved the use of the one location, but there was certain things that I didn't totally completely love about it. And so I remember when Saw 2 came out, I was like, I'll just wait for it to come to home video. And so I remember renting that. And for me, I thought Saw 2 actually made the first one better because it kind of filled in some of those gaps for me. And I was like, oh, okay, now it's all really starting to click. And that's when I got like super into like this sort of story and the weird sort of like timeline of everything. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the game we're gonna play. And I was still a fan of what James and Lee were able to do with that first movie, so much so that like, I remember seeing Death Sentence in theaters. I went saw Dead Silence, and so I wasn't, wasn't like, oh, these guys, didn't know what they were doing, but I felt like there was just these little things that like my brain just couldn't get over. I've since come around. Like I still love it. I still think, I feel like Danny Glover's in a different movie sometimes. Like, God bless him, but I just feel like sometimes he's in a totally different place.
All right, Danny Glover.
Yeah. But yeah, and then it was like, and then it all started to click. So then 3, I was back. I was in it. And I'm curious, like for you, because, as these movies have gone on and on, like, what is your sort of take on like the mythology? Because everybody sort of calls them, like, I've seen the words quote unquote convoluted thrown around, or like there's too much. Does the overlapping of everything, has it ever really bothered you? Like, I kind of think it's fun to pull apart. I'm a mystery person by nature, so I kind of love that.
No, I mean, that's, to me, that's the thing that makes the first 7 films as kind of endlessly rewatchable and enjoyable as they are. That sort of soap opera-y, every year they're going to answer some of those questions, but they're going to throw new things in. You're going to find out that what you saw 2 movies ago is being paid off here, but in a different way. That, like all that stuff, it just made me like delighted. It's partly why I get angry at the torture porn thing. It's just like, well, the same with real porn. Real porn, yeah, I get you're not there for the story. No one shows up. At least I certainly don't show up just to watch the torture scenes. To me, those things are just like letting your brain kind of process all the storyline stuff. He's giving you 5 minutes to like, oh, okay, so yeah, that took place before he died, and that was when he was still a cop and he wasn't a bad guy. It's just like, while some guys being flambéed or whatever the hell's going on. That stuff, to me, that's like, now when I'm at home rewatching, that's when I look at my phone, or something. Like, I don't need to see that shit over and over again. Not to take away from the effects work or the design of the traps or anything like that, but to me, what kept me coming back was, the ongoing story, and like the idea that like they would give you a reason to want to rewatch the other movies. So yeah, I'm not a big rewatcher of movies. Like I rewatch a couple things for traditions, like Halloween on Halloween or whatever. But to me, like the days of buying a movie that I enjoy on Blu-ray just to have it and watch it again is kind of long gone. Like, because I just don't have the time really to just rewatch a movie anymore when it's a standalone kind of thing. But with the Saws, rewatching them was like part of the fun whenever there was a new one coming out, because you almost, you don't need the refresher, but it would certainly help. And, and it's more fun going back. So it's like, okay, Saw 6 is coming out, so let's rewatch, Saw 1 through 5. And then you get to like Saw 3, and you're like, oh, that, I remember, because Saw 5 is more fresh in my head, that this is where that plot line started, and stuff like that. So there's always these like kind of like new reveals that are kind of being paid off, or even just like sort of like mild surprises. Like, I remember being kind of surprised how little Hoffman is in Saw 3 when he shows up, because he, now you just think Hoffman, he's like this like important character, but in Saw 3 he's only in like a couple minutes, and he's like
nothing.
Yeah, he's inconsequential, but it's like he does give a weird look at one point, and it's just like, did they base everything that came after that on Costas Mandylor's just decision to have a weird look on his face right here? You watch it, there's just nothing to indicate what that character became, or if you rewatch, I think it's Saw 6, where the coroner's like, I've worked on every Jigsaw. And then like you rewatch the ones like, oh shit, it is that guy. Like that's great. So like to me, that's the stuff that made it, made me want to keep coming back was the story, the complicated, their word, not mine storyline. I could, they could do one without any torture scenes. It wouldn't really bother me.
Yeah, it's funny because like I remember before Saw 6 came out, my Brian and I, we were like, okay, somehow we had all this free time on our hands. I should have appreciated that more back then. And I was like, oh, you know what we're going to do? I'm like, we are going to chronologically put together the entire Saw franchise and like go through, time everything out, because that's kind of the fun of it, is trying to figure out exactly like the whole timeline of everything. And we're like, oh, this is going to be great. Like we had like 2 notebooks filled with like all these different notes and time codes and everything like that. And we were ready. Like we started, and then Saw 6 came out, and I was like, well, son of a bitch. I was like, now it's like you have to almost start completely over again. But that, to me, I kind of loved that.
Yeah.
And I it's so interesting to me because both of us, we know like what it is like when you have a horror franchise and you're getting deep into those numbers, and the idea that you could actually introduce new things that feel very relevant in the 6th movie, like that never really happens. Like the only time I can ever think of that really happening is like New Nightmare, which is number 7.
Yeah.
And that's not even like the same thing. That's like something completely separate. But I remember like, I love Saw 6, but as soon as we left, I looked at Brian, I was like, oh, well, okay. I was like, we almost have to start completely over again. And at this point, I'm like, I don't know that I can. I was like, I think we're done at this point. But I do love what you mentioned, Hoffman, because when we were doing our rewatch before Spiral, which I do love the fact that we all spent all these hours rewatching the Saw movies, and you get to Spiral and it's pretty much inconsequential, which, is a double-edged sword, which we'll talk about when we get to Spiral. But I was really surprised because first in my head, I really thought Costas was so much more involved by Saw 3. And then I was like, he's got like maybe 3 or 4 lines in the entire movie. And I was like, wait, that was it? And somehow, God bless him, but like he basically then ultimately gets a franchise built around him in some really ridiculous but ridiculously entertaining ways. And I just kind of love that. Like, I don't know that there would ever be another series that would build a storyline like this around Costas Mandalore. And it's kind of awesome. So I was a big fan of that. I'm curious for you because, you mentioned, obviously taking the torture porn stuff out. There goes the Fast and the Furious. Like we have road construction. It's 25 miles per hour outside of my window, but nobody cares. So that happens like all the time. But yeah, so it's interesting to me. Like you mentioned taking out the torture porn scenes. But do you have traps that like are sort of your favorite because of maybe the psychological element? Like I still think for me, the Shawnee scene is probably the best because I think it sort of laid the framework for everything. And I don't think very many of them have actually ever topped the feeling I got in that moment of watching her deal with, with the bear trap basically, or the reverse bear trap thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they. I mean, it's not that I dislike them. That's not the selling point for me. That comes that comes from more of a a defense against the critics kind of deal. When I'm watching them, they're fine. It's more on like the rewatch where it's just like, okay, well, this is the torture part. Like this isn't, this is the trap, and I know what happens, and I'm not going to get any new information about the mythology while this guy's being twisted apart. But there are definitely some that I really like. I really like the ones that I think I wrote about this a while back, where it's like there's a real psychological element to the concept. Like some of them don't. It's just like, okay, what does digging a key out of your eye, how does that really tie into whatever it is got you here? But like, to me, the one I always think about is like probably the least violent one in the entire series. It's the one where the guy, or Jeff in part 3, has to burn his kids' toys to get the key that'll save the person. I don't even really remember what's happening to that person at the time. I think, yeah, it's not the pig guy, is it?
I believe that is the pig
It's
guy.
the guy being drowned in pig. Okay, so that stuff's just happening to him. It's gross, but like I'm tortured watching this poor guy who has, he lost his kid and like these toys and like, the mementos of that, and he has to burn them all to save this guy that he partially blames for his, not for his son's death, but for the guy that, because it's the judge, right? So it's like this third party guy, that really means nothing to him, and he has to burn these toys that he won't even let his other kid play with. Like, to me, that one's just like such a gut wrench. And I really like the ones in Saw 6 because they're based on the medical guy's sort of
his basically his insurance mantra.
Strange, yeah, his insurance, yeah, but which is like a totally arbitrary sort of criteria. It's just like, all right, do you save this old woman who, has a family but will probably die sooner or later anyway because she's old, or do you save this young healthy guy who has nothing? And it's like, oh, fuck, like, yeah, yeah. So like those are the ones that are like more engaging to. I tend to prefer, I like Saw 2, but I tend to prefer in the series when there's a one character kind of running through the gauntlet, the way that Saw 3 and 6 are, as opposed to there are a bunch of people together, which is like what Saw 2, 5, and Jigsaw are. I think it works better that way because when you get the group, that's when the traps tend to be kind of indifferent. Because obviously Jigsaw, and maybe he does, maybe won't know who's alive to get to that next one, so they're not going to have any personal sort of relation to their trap. It's just going to be like, all right, we have to, find the key and let's start beating the hell out of each other to find it or whatever it is. So I think I prefer the traps that are specific to that person. It wouldn't make sense to put Amanda in that burn the toys thing because she'd be like, okay, I don't know who this kid is. So yeah, to me that's the good stuff. And, I think the more that they can tie a trap to the victim or at least the quote unquote hero of that movie, the protagonist, the more engaging it'll be.
Yeah, I it's funny when I was doing my rewatch because I've always 2 and 6 have always sort of been my favorites of the sequels, and I came away really conflicted about like the fact that like I think 3 is really up there for me now because of how personal it feels, and it's not even just Jeff going through the stuff that he's going through, but I actually really think Shawnee makes that movie like so freaking good, like the torment that she's dealing with in the scenes that she has and this relationship that she shares, with John. Like there's so much emotion there. And I guess it just never clicked with me before. And for me, like I really love what they do in that one. And I'm a little bummed that was the end of Shawnee's story because I feel like there should have been at least like one more movie with her in it, because I feel like Amanda's story really wasn't done yet.
Yeah, especially in retrospect when you see how much they were able to do with Hoffman. It's just like, it would have been cool to have, a movie with her running the game, and then Hoffman takes over or whatever the hell. But yeah, they got her back in 6, but it was just like, clear up a few things. It wasn't much of a storyline really. Yeah,
and it was interesting too because I know, like, I think in 5 is when they first show us some glimpses of Jill's clinic, and the guy who ends up like basically causing her to lose the baby, the woman with him isn't Shawnee, but then she's there in 6, which I was like, okay, I'm all right with it. I'm going to follow it. I'm not going to harp on that little detail too much, but it was like a different woman in the first one or in 5. And then 6, it was like, well, then they put Shawnee with him. So then it makes it a little more personal.
Cecil just got around. That's all.
He was a very popular guy because he could score all the good shit. With a name like Cecil, like, come on. But it's interesting because, as goofy, even because like I would say like for me like 5 and 7 are kind of, that's where everybody's punching bags and they're easy punching bags. I hated them less this time, and I don't know if it's just because it's been a while and I'm so starved for Jigsaw stories, but like when I was doing the rewatch I was like, okay, like 7's not great, but I don't dislike it as much as I did when I saw it. And even 5, like there are definitely moments that don't feel right, but like again, it was just kind of like, despite the fact that there's no big twist, I was like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I remembered. And I don't know if that's just nostalgia talking, which is totally possible. But I think because at the point, like when you're getting into 4, 5, 6, and 7, you become so invested in Hoffman. I was just like, okay, whatever. Like, just take me wherever you want me to go. I'm going.
The problem with 5, the thing with 5 is that it's not that it's a bad movie. It's just that it's not worth a year to wait for, and it wasn't setting up anything that was worth another year to find out.
Yeah.
So when it came out, I mean, you have this basic, essentially have a 2-year gap between 4, which, is this like establishing Hoffman and setting up the idea that the series could continue without Jigsaw, and then 6, which was just really good. So you had like this like 2-year gap. But now when you're rewatching them and you do one every day or whatever, however you're marathoning, it's fine. It's like a filler episode. And any serialized TV show in existence has one of those, and it feels just like one of those. So it's just like, all right, they got to take a little break, and they can't be topping themselves every time. They got to, sometimes they have to dial it back a bit in order to ramp it up again later. So like, yeah, I mean, now whenever I rewatch 5, I'm usually pretty fine with it. It's, Jigsaw gets, I mean, not Jigsaw, sorry, Saw 3D, I think I like a little less every time I see it. When I came out, I thought it was actually like somewhere in the middle, and now it's pretty much at the low end.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I think I just get excited with good 3D because it was good 3D, and I had the same. I had the same kind of regret about my Final Destination 4 review because I came out of that one being like, hell yeah, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's not that good. Yeah, I think I just need to. Not that 3D is a big thing anymore, but I think I should never review anything in 3D unless it's a bad presentation. I'm not letting it cloud my judgment.
You're an easy mark for 3D, which means
it used to be, at least. I don't even remember last time I went and saw a 3D movie.
I think the last one that I can remember was maybe The Force Awakens was like the last big one.
Oh, wow.
Was that 3D? I can't even remember.
Yeah, I can't. I think I saw, it was probably an animated one. Like I probably like with Will or something. But yeah, that one I have less fun with when I revisit because there's just too much meanness in that one.
It is horrible to women. Like the women in that movie.
Somebody in that movie was very mad at their girlfriend or something.
I don't know if it was because did Marcus and Patrick write that one too?
Well, they did, but they had to combine it from 2 scripts because it was supposed to be 7 and 8, and they combined it. Okay. And the producers do call a lot of the shots on that series. So it's like whenever there's a bad story idea, it's like you can't just necessarily blame the writers for all we know that they were being told what to write at that point. So I remember at the Jigsaw premiere, the writers and the directors were there, and they barely got to say anything. The producers were the ones talking the entire time.
Oh geez.
So yeah, I think those guys are a little more hands-on than say like whatever other movies those people that have their names on the writing and directing credits would be comfortable with sometimes. I don't know. It just seems that way to me. I'm not, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's the way it's come off to me. So I'm always hesitant to blame any particular person for this or that bad story call because it's like, all right, at the end of the day, they wrote Saw 6, which is one of the best ones. So if they can get it that good, I can't say that, oh, they're terrible and they don't get it because they obviously do get it. So there's something in the mix that went wrong on Saw 3D.
Yeah.
Because, the whole, especially, and maybe this because it happens near the end, I'm a big proponent believing that like the last like kind of 10 minutes of a movie is just absolutely going to form your judgment of it. That's why like bad movies that have great endings tend to get like people come out and be like, oh, that was great. I'm like, no, it really wasn't. It just got great in the last 10 minutes. But that one at the end, when they kill the guy's wife horribly.
Oh my God.
Jill.
Yeah.
Jill, you assume is going to die. Didn't have to be that horrible, but the guy, the survivor, the fake survivor guy, his wife, it's like, what the hell did she do wrong?
Like she just got basically sucked into the whole thing.
Immolated. It's like one of the harshest deaths in the series. It's like, Jesus. Like she should like been there.
Yeah. I did appreciate though that the furnace that she gets burned up in is shaped like a pig. Which is I never noticed until we rewatched it this time, and I was like, oh my God, it's shaped like a pig. I was like, that's interesting. Good.
So yeah. Ultimately, five I can deal with. I'm fine with that. But after 6 is kind of where I, my rewatches in the future will probably
dwindle. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember. Again, it might have just been because it'd been a few years and I was just really excited for more. So I remember having a pretty good time with Jigsaw when we saw it in theaters. Also, they had us go see it in 4DX.
Oh, nice.
Which was an interesting experience. I mean, it's not for me. It's not worth spending $40 a person on in general, but it was kind of interesting because it almost made it feel like a Saw roller coaster a lot of the times because you're floating around when the camera's moving and all that kind of stuff. But like when we were rewatching it, it just made me realize like why I do appreciate the direction they took with Spiral, because I think just shoehorning John into that story really lessens it. Yeah. And then also made me realize like this guy is basically dealing with like cancer, like really horrible, terrible, cancer, and he's busier than I am when I'm healthy. he's now he's got new proteges here. Yeah. He's got proteges over there. He's got all kinds of different workspaces. And I was just like, oh, this is a little on the ridiculous side, even for Saw. There's elements of Jigsaw that I like. Like I like the idea of like there sort of being this element of the dark web that's obsessed with John Kramer and the traps and everything. But I also find it really interesting, like that most of those, wouldn't they be like somewhere locked up in police? Like it's some sort of police place, like, where you put evidence, but like instead this chick's got a whole museum of stuff, which is cool, but a little weird. I realized like going back and rewatching, I was like, oh, okay. All right. This just felt a little strange to me.
I mean, the thing with Jigsaw was that they're trying to have it both ways, that they wanted to kind of restart and let people in that, maybe were getting tired of the convoluted storyline, but they also wanted to still make a movie that was a Saw and that fit into it. And that would give you the reveal and give you a new perspective on what came before and that sort of thing. But it's like, you got to do one or the other. And that's what Spiral just did the other. That's, it's in that world. And they just say, Jigsaw, like, no, he's dead. And then they just move on. And it's great. At the end of Jigsaw, I'm like, well, wait, what the hell was this asshole been through all the other movies? This Logan guy. If he was the first one, because half the story is very basically a Jigsaw origin, because it's like him building the first bear trap and clearly establishing it before he was really that sick. So it's like, okay, this is before Gordon. He has this other doctor named Logan that can do all this stuff. And in the present day, Logan is still up and about and doing Jigsaw's sort of deal, Well, where the hell was he through all the other movies then? Why did Jigsaw even need Gordon if he had this other doctor? So it's just like your twist screwed things up, and then nobody liked it, so they're not even going to follow up on it. That bugged me then, and it bugs me even more now, because it's just like now it's even more of a waste, because now they're doing Spiral, and Spiral did it right. So it's like Jigsaw is even less interesting or useful in the grand scheme of things.
I also were you super bummed? I was gonna say really quick in terms of Saw 3D and then going into Jigsaw, were you kind of bummed out that they reintroduced Gordon into everything,
Mm.
there's a really great little stinger at the end of Saw 3D when, like, basically Gordon shows up, takes
Mm.
Hoffman, throws him in the room,
Yeah.
and then that's it. Like,
Yep.
to me, that story is still out there. Like, that's
Yeah.
still out there, and that's a thing that I like for a movie, like a franchise that so is good about wrapping up these little like loose ends. Like,
Yeah.
that to me is a huge loose end out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Spiral just quickly mentions the disciples, but they're non-committal about it. And also, since it's 10 years later, you can also just be like, all right, well, maybe these guys were doing their thing for a couple months and then realized, like, it's kind of weird to do without Jigsaw now. I'll just kind of like quietly retire or something. But they didn't conflict with anything, and there's still the door open for that. But it's like, when are they going to get back to it? Now it's been a decade.
I know. And who besides like us diehards is actually going to care?
Yeah, so it's just like that. And they were talking the week before Spiral opened, like, oh, if this is a hit, this is going to keep the series going. You'll see Hoffman again. Somebody even said we'll see Logan again. I'm like, I don't want to see Logan again.
No, I'm good with him.
But
go away.
It's just like, how can you really even do it at this point and expect people to pick up those threads the way they were? And to do an actual quote unquote Saw 8 that would get back to those characters in that story, when they've now twice made it clear that they kind of want to get away from it. It seems like it would be like a step back at this point that is just for the diehard fans. And some of them probably moved on. We're sitting here talking about, where did Hoffman go? What happened to Gordon? Like, but like there are other fans that are just like, they don't care.
Who cares? Like, just
they moved on with their lives. It's just like there are obviously some series you stick with forever and ever, and some you just kind of trail out. Like, I remember, it's not horror, but like Hunger Games. I didn't bother to go see the last Hunger Games movie. When was that? That was like 5 years ago now, right? I still haven't seen it. I'd need to rewatch the first 3 just to get reorient myself with what was going on to understand the last one. I didn't care enough. That's why I didn't go to the 4th one. Sometimes you see movies because they're just kind of part of the zeitgeist at that time, or you're just seeing them because your boyfriend or your girlfriend at the time was into them. That's why you're going. You're seeing them. Whatever it is, it's not so much of a personal investment. And after X number of years, it's like you can't go home again, that kind of thing. So, I would be really, really shocked if we ever did see a proper follow-up to Saw 3D at this point.
Yeah.
The best we could maybe hope for is maybe like Lionsgate commissions like a comic book or something like that. They're not going to invest, 10, 15 million into a production and God knows how much to market a movie that is specifically aimed at the people that were clearly already kind of moving on back then. I mean, that's why they wrapped it up, because the grosses kept going down. And, COVID is obviously to blame, but Spiral's box office did not indicate that people are exactly salivating for this franchise anymore in that way. And that's with a news story that anybody could have gone to. And I think they made that very clear this time, unlike Jigsaw, that this was not something you needed to be a diehard fan to understand. In fact, I'd argue it'd be better to go into Spiral without really knowing anything about the Saws. But at the same time, well, like I said, how do you go back when people aren't really even driving up the new stuff, the standalone stuff, to the same kind of levels that even they were hitting kind of in like below par, I would say. I mean, with the lowest grossing one was Saw 6. Because of paranormal and because of other things, but for whatever you want to chalk the blame up to, it was the lowest grosser, and I'm not sure if Spiral will even get to that level.
Yeah,
even with COVID. So it's like,
I saw 0 ads for Spiral on any sort of television, and I generally because I watch wrestling, and there's always usually like something if there's a genre movie out, like you'll tend to get ads for that during wrestling and things like that. And like the only ads that we saw for Spiral were on YouTube. And I'm wondering if it was just, a combination of COVID and then that they just didn't really push it. I think they just thought that like having Chris Rock and just throwing it out there was going to be enough. And I don't think it was. And I do think there was so many people who didn't quite know until maybe right before the movie came out that they didn't have to be so invested in the original franchise, that might have deterred a lot of people. It's interesting. I mean, and also you have theaters running at like 20 to 30% of capacity too still.
Yeah. I think Jigsaw might have hurt Spiral too, because, I think people are expecting, oh, it's going to be the same thing again, where it's like, oh, it's, it's unrelated and it's not Hoffman, it's not Amanda and all this. But then in the last 10 minutes, it's like, dun, 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 and it is. And it would just be like, lost maybe. And so like, all right, well, I don't want to get suckered into that again because, the Jigsaw already kind of established that a spinoff couldn't commit to really being a spinoff.
Yeah.
So it's like, how much can we do to tell people that they don't have to see the others, and also that it's worth going to see on its own merit too. I mean, it's a lot of work to cover for one movie, and as much as Chris Rock is a presence, it's not for his acting really, and I don't know if curiosity of Chris Rock in a horror movie is going to be a ticket seller. You know what I mean? Especially now, where it's just like, all right, that's interesting, but is it interesting enough to deal with everything you have to deal with now to go to a movie, and also, deal with, and like you said, theaters that aren't even running at full capacity anyway. It's just like, how are you going to turn that many tickets? Turn that much curiosity into ticket sales with so many things working against it. There's Godzilla versus Kong made a lot of money. And so there's obviously it's possible, but Godzilla versus Kong is also the sort of big screen, got to see this big, got to see it loud kind of event at the end of the day, a Saw movie, and they've never, ever been must see big screen, kind of events. I mean, they're kind of small movies. They're all set in rooms and they barely ever go outside. And
yeah. I'm wondering too, because I think from what I've heard, I'm pretty sure that this is coming to VOD pretty early next month.
Oh, okay. And also, not to interrupt, I didn't even realize this. Canada still hasn't even reopened their theaters.
Yeah, they're still
Canadian
on lockdown.
Movies.
Yeah,
they're all shut. So it's like the people that worked on it can't even go see it. They're really not going to be promoting it.
Yeah, it's because I think they're still on lockdown. I think through mid-June, which I think is about when I don't know. I don't even know where I heard this, but I'm pretty sure like from the release date, I think Lionsgate was going to wait 19 days to then put it on VOD.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that maybe like more people will catch up with it like at home. Because honestly, like I'm just, fully vaxxed. Like I'm still waiting out my 2 weeks and all that. But I'm even like once I'm past that threshold, I'm still not itching to get back into a theater setting with a bunch of people just yet. Like for me, I'm cool with the drive-in. Like I can go sit in my own little bubble, be safe. I don't have to worry about people. It's still a great way because I don't have to deal with people on their phones or anything like that. I don't have to worry about COVID or anything like that either. And worrying about if people are going to keep their masks on or if they're not, are they vaccinated? Are they not? Like, especially because like now we're getting ready to lift our mask mandate here in a few weeks. So like for me, like I don't know when I don't know what movie it's going to be that's going to get me back into theaters, like as a fan.
Yeah.
But I know from like an outsider's perspective, if I wasn't super nerdy about these movies, like I probably would wait for VOD because I'd be like, okay, I could just kind of wait it out. Because it is something very different. Like this would be a much different conversation if we were talking about Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that would be a safe thing to say for most horror fans. I think if like there's the movie that's going to get people to finally go back to theaters, honestly, I think it's going to be either Candyman or Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, you mentioned the drive-in. I don't know which one you go to, but the one I went to has had the Spiral trailer before every movie I have seen there in the past year.
Interesting.
And it was so nice to finally understand the context behind all those lines that I've heard now, 50 times. That was just a diversion to get us out of that precinct. Like, oh, that was the diversion that got them out of the precinct. It was totally like it was like, the internet meme of that's Chappie, when Chappie shows up in Chappie. This is every single one of those lines. Like, that's it. Got it.
Yeah, I think because we usually go to Mission Tiki. So I think the trailer we've seen the longest there has been Free Guy.
Oh, weird. See, I never see that one there. I see, because I go to the Tiki too. I get Candyman, Spiral. I was getting Antlers for the longest time. They finally dropped that one. Black Widow a lot. Another movie that still hasn't come out, and I don't even know where it went. Run, Sweetheart, Run, or just Sweetheart.
I saw that at Sundance, like 2020.
Yeah, they were showing that one a lot, but yeah, Spiral every time, man. And then the Tiki was also showing Willy's Wonderland trailer for a few weeks, which really annoyed me because they didn't show the movie Willy's Wonderland. I had to go to the other drive-in that I won't name that I don't like as much to go see that one.
We don't like that one as much either. We went there to support the David Arquette documentary.
Okay.
And it was Screen 2. And it's funny, we always remember Screen 2 because we went there a few years ago. It was more than a few years ago, but we went there to see White House Down, and it was that screen, and the sound was so horrible. And we were like, oh God. And we were like, okay, well, the only place that's playing the David Arquette doc is there. We're like, we're going to just do it. Hopefully it's not going to be on that screen. And sure enough, it was. But I actually audio recorded what it sounded like in our car.
Nice.
And it literally sounded like somebody was like transmitting the movie through like a CB radio. And it was just the worst thing. But we stayed because we were, trying to be supportive. But I mean, we probably could have left because they already had our money. But yeah, I refused to go back there. I'm done. I was like, I'll Mission Tiki. Or have you been to the Van Buren at all?
No.
It's nice. It's about 10 or 15 minutes further, but it's like a really gorgeous setting.
Oh, okay.
It's really wide open and different. We went there last year to do Goonies and Gremlins.
Oh, okay.
And it was like the perfect sunset, and it's huge. Like the parking lots are huge there. Right. So if you ever get a chance to check that one out, I would highly recommend it. We like that one as well. It's run by the same company too.
Okay.
So, because I know, I don't know when Mission Tiki is going to have to give back their property to Amazon because Amazon bought it a few years ago. So
yeah,
we're kind of like, okay, we're just doing the drive-in while we can. So I'm sure people are like, great, we're so happy about your drive-in. I go in tangents. What am I going to do? But yeah,
if anybody's listening, because I'm on it, they'd certainly be used to my tangents. So don't worry about that.
So with Spiral, it was so interesting because going into this one, I'd only ever seen really the short trailer for it. I didn't even watch the long extended trailer that they released right before because I was like, I just want to go in and watch it. And there was parts of me that wished like it felt more like it was part of the Saw series. But then I realized, like, again, after seeing Jigsaw, I was like, oh God, no, we can't. We just can't do this anymore. Lord knows I don't need to see like Chris Rock walking through a street and there's John Kramer crossing paths with him or something. But I love in your review that you said about 15 minutes into the movie, you figured out who it was. It took me 30. So I feel like I was a little bit slower. So, obviously, and we're getting into spoilers, which, we said we were going to do at the beginning. Was it just the fact that there's this new guy coming in and you're like, oh, this guy's definitely got to be the killer?
Yeah. Anytime you got a new partner, you got to be suspicious of him. And I'm like, okay, but this is a Saw. So the twist is going to be obviously a little more complicated than that. And so I was actually looking a little bit at, I was thinking like, maybe it's like a screen thing. There's going to be two people. So I'm like, maybe it's him, but it's also got to be somebody else. But when the dude fucking, oh, my phone's dead. Can I borrow yours? And walks off screen.
Yes.
Are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, Jesus, come on. Like, that, and then I'm still, and I'm gonna spoil another movie here, and I hope it's another movie with the same name. There's a movie called Spiral. It's Adam Green's movie, and in that movie, um,
Joel David Moore.
yeah, Joel David Moore is kind of crazy, and he's, you can tell he's like off, and he's got this new girlfriend, Amber Tamblyn, and throughout the movie, she never is seen talking to anybody else. And so you get to a point in the movie like, wait, it's really weird. She has not had a scene with any other character. Holy shit, she's all in his head. And then the twist comes and it's like, no, she wasn't all in his head, and he really did kill her. And I'm like thinking, I'm like, the same kind of lines here. I'm like, it's getting so obvious that it's this guy, that they're doing that. They're doing what they did in that other Spiral, where they're like, they're toying the audience, the smarty pants audience that thinks they haven't figured it out. It's either going to be even more simpler than that, or it's going to be way more complicated than that. Either way, I'll be like, kind of giggling that that they got me. And then it's like, no, it's just him. Okay. I think it was that guy. Huh? And then it wasn't really a twist. It was just a reveal. I'm like, all right, I'm fine with you guys. I mean, I prefer you dropping all the characters and other stuff now, because like I could just invest myself in this story by itself. But it's like, how do you try to revive the Saw franchise without a twist? Like, that doesn't count as a twist, to just like revealing the bad guy. And it's it's like, oh well, he wasn't really dead. I'm like, who the fuck thought he was really dead when he was killed off screen? No one dies off screen in anything, let alone a Saw movie.
Yeah. If anything, the Scream movies prepared me for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like, if you don't see it, it didn't happen. So.
Yeah. It was the phone moment was the moment where I was like, especially because I think Scream 3 is the movie that really like made me realize like certain aspects of things to watch out for in movies, which is funny because in Scream 3, when Detective Kincaid uses Roman's phone, that actually doesn't really ever pay off. I mean, I'm sure probably in a different version of that movie it does, because I know that they toyed with Kincaid being one of the killers at a certain point, which actually I think would have made a lot more sense in a way than Roman. But and I say that as somebody who actually loves Scream 3. But that movie taught me two things: that if somebody's going to borrow somebody's phone, you keep an eye on them. And if somebody gets killed off screen, like Roman does in that movie, that's another huge red flag.
Yeah.
So anytime that happens, I'm always like, that's red flags for me. Yeah. So 30 minutes, I was like, oh, okay. So this kid's involved. How is this going to play out? And I do, I was okay with how obvious it ended up being, just because I was really invested in the rest of it. I do wish they'd pushed sort of the agenda of dealing with police corruption a little further and a little more succinctly, because I think it gets a little wishy-washy at the end.
Yeah.
Because ultimately,
like,
I was gonna say, because ultimately, like, Sam Jackson, like, is involved with all this, but he let his kid basically, get treated like shit for how long, even though he was being a good guy.
Yeah.
So that still makes him really culpable and deserving of his fate too, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't. I liked it wasn't that I disliked who the killer was, and I enjoy. I'm like, oh, that's actually, in some ways, maybe just because of what's going on in the real world now. Like, in some ways, I find his attitude to be more justified than even Jigsaw's was, because Jigsaw's is like very basic. Was,
oh, you're a whore.
It boils down to Jigsaw boils down to people don't appreciate their life, and I'm like, yeah, I get that, but like the way he went about it was like not always didn't always jive with that. But it's just like, this guy just wants to fuck with dirty cops, and that's great, because fuck them.
Yeah.
So like,
more power to him.
No problem. I just wish the mystery itself wasn't as obvious as. I mean, I'm hoping there are people that are completely blown away by it. Certainly, there are people saying this, on Twitter that get retweeted, saying like, "Holy shit, the ending blew me away." Like, okay, maybe maybe it's not as obvious. But I will say, I have a friend who had to see the movie for work purposes, and she is not a horror person at all. And I think she's probably seen maybe 5 horror movies in her life, and all of them were probably with me, or at least at my insistence. And and even she figured it out at the phone moment. So it's like, all right, it's not because I'm like, you know, tuned into these things like, you know, Rucker Hauer was tuned into the killer because he had so much coffee in Split Second. Like I'm just, you know, I certainly see that, you know, that could be the case, but if she figured it out just as quickly, then obviously then this mystery was not well executed.
Yeah. It's funny though, because when we saw it, like my Brian was basically like he hadn't figured it out. So I was kind of glad that I didn't show my cards scene, because I was like, especially because we were in a room by ourselves. So we could like, you know, say little things back and forth, and we're not gonna, you know, annoy anybody. And at the moment when he grabs the phone, I was about to say, oh my God, this guy's totally in on it. Yeah. But then I was like, I didn't, just in case. Yeah. And sure enough, like we were leaving, he's like, yeah, I didn't really know until like, you know, he's like, I kind of thought maybe something was up when they found the body that was skinned and stuff like that. He's like, that seemed weird. And he was like, but I didn't really quite, you know, put it totally together. And I was like, oh, interesting. So yeah,
somebody else said that they thought it might be Sam, which I was like, all right, so that's somebody that didn't see the trailer then, because obviously Sam is canceled out as a suspect just in the trailer because you see him in a trap. And I was just like, oh, I wonder if like this is a case of like seeing the trailer was, you know, a disservice to the movie, at least the way they cut it. I mean, obviously they want to get you that hook of like, holy shit, that's Sam goddamn Jackson in a saw trap. I got to see this. But at the same time, he is kind of the only other suspect that was plausible in the movie, you know, because he also just kind of disappears from it for a while. But it was just like, it never crossed my mind that he might be the villain, because again, I've seen that trailer so many times now at the drive-in. You know, I'd suspect Chris Rock before I'd suspect Sam Jackson at that point. So that was the other thing about the mystery, is that there was not a lot of potential other suspects. You know, I mean, there were a few other cops that kind of disappeared, but like, if you'd watch it, you'd be like, okay, if that guy turned out to be the killer, you'd be like, all right, what was his name again? Like, I mean, like they were too, nothing against the actors or anything, but they were too kind of anonymous, I think, to really be a potential killer here. But maybe if, you know, there's Spiral 2 and 3, they're like the Hoffman and Saw 3, and eventually they will be those iconic characters.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel like there's a potential for like a Hoffman just like hanging out in the wings of this one, that we're going to be like, hey, I remember that guy?
They kept, not to be pickish, maybe it was just because she happened to be an attractive woman and the camera just found her, but they kept like finding a lot to do for that receptionist.
Yes.
So like she was the only other one. Like, is she involved somehow? Like I was thinking maybe she's actually that guy's wife, but then it turns out like that was the closest thing to a surprise, is the fact that he didn't actually have a family. But you know,
the scene where he was,
and like the camera would just linger on her like an extra second. Like, this is like kind of an anonymous character. She's the receptionist. Who cares what she? But it was like, all right, maybe that's how they try to like tease those things out.
As a former receptionist, I was happy because nobody gives a shit about the receptionist. Yeah. But I did think that scene was actually pretty clever, because when he was just talking about like, oh, sleep training's a bitch and stuff like that, I was like, oh, okay. Like I kind of bought that moment. Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's kind of clever. Yeah. You know, I was like, oh, okay.
And it's a Saw movie, so we know that the budgets aren't huge. So yeah, they're not going to hire another actor. They're just going to play sound effects.
And we're certainly not going to like hire babies to have to come on set, because that's like expensive. Because then you got to have like caretakers and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, because you've got two big names, probably eating up a lot of that budget.
Oh yeah.
So do you feel like having Chris Rock and Sam Jackson, do you think it helped or hindered it?
I liked how they were able to kind of bring some genuine humanity to these movies for once, because it didn't really dawn on me until they brought it up in this one. I'm like, like he's at one point, Chris Rock he's dealing with a meth dealer guy. He's pretending to be a strung out, meth head, trying to sell him an iPad. And he's like, look, this iPad's got Uber Eats. It's got YouTube. And I'm like, this is the first time this entire franchise that I've ever heard any of these people talk about eating, you know, and like him and Sam too. They're like, let's get, you know, get a slice later and stuff. I'm like, oh, they do consume food. That's interesting. Except for Jigsaw eating cereal, which is more of like a weird character, you know, kind of quirk thing.
Yeah.
Saw too. It's just like, oh, so these people do normal things, and then like, you know, he has that like little monologue about Forrest Gump. I'm like, okay, so this is in some sort of real world. Like after all, like the series has always been so insular. Like I have half expected that if it wasn't already done on St. Elsewhere, that the freaking finale would be pulling out a snow globe, because this like, this town is just like, its name is Metro City. It doesn't exist in any state in the world that's ever been established. It's like Springfield, where it's like they have everything. There's farms and a metropolis and everything else. All just like little,
and like a little bit of a rust belt with all the industrial stuff.
So it's like that could be all be a, but like the fact that they do use iPads and they do watch Forrest Gump, and apparently they have a version of New Jack City that maybe Chris Rock is not in.
Right.
I would think Zeke would be really confused about why Pookie looks just like him in New Jackson.
He's like, do I have a twin brother out there that I don't know about?
That's actually the twist. It's
oh my God, that would have been amazing.
But like, so it in addition to just like adding some warmth and levity to the movie, it helped kind of further differentiate itself from the others in a way that helped more for me to be able to just sink into it and not be like, all right, well, maybe Hoffman could show up here. Like I was able to let go of that. And that's something that I was never able to do with Jigsaw, for good reason, because it ended up being, you know, and if you remember Jigsaw, they did not announce that Tobin Bell was in the movie.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be a big surprise that he showed up. But it's like, this one, I felt more confident that it was never going to end up being a big reveal for the old guard, for the faithful fans. Like it was always going to just be its own thing. And I think those little things, you know, people will say like, oh, like I hate that there's comedy in this movie. Like I didn't. I think it helps establish itself as its own, you know, branch of this series without distracting itself away with trying to be, you know, a new Saw movie.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I think that if there's one thing that like you could say about like the original Saw movies is like, you know, especially if you sort of shotgun them in a few nights and you watch the whole series, like they're kind of bleak and oppressive after you kind of get through all of them, where you're just like, okay, I need to go watch like a comedy or something, or like just something light. And I like the fact that for this one that they were able to sort of bring in some comedic elements, because it didn't make everything feel as heavy. And it's funny you mentioned like how people are eating in this movie, because the restaurant that Sam Jackson orders from is actually a real restaurant in Toronto and LA. And I've now seen people on Twitter who've been ordering from them, which is hilarious, which is kind of the best advertising ever.
Product placement in a Saw. Who would have thought it?
Yeah, but it's like a real restaurant in Toronto and LA. And somebody last night actually got like takeout from the LA restaurant, which I thought was hilarious.
Months ago.
Yeah. So I looked up their website. Yeah. So they have really great Italian food. So, you know, I'm totally blanking on the name of it because I don't have the page open on my website, on my internet. But yeah, but apparently they do a lot of takeout in LA. So yeah, it's interesting because like I was kind of nervous, you know, because again, knowing what the original Saw movies were like, I was kind of like, oh, do I want to move forward? But I think you have to at this point. And I think, you know, that there are enough elements of what made those original movies so great that you could sort of parse parts of those for this new series. And I'm just like, we were driving home and I'm like, where do you take this story now? Like, because now Max Mignella is like out there. Like, does he team up with other people who want to sort of deal with cops in other cities? Like, does this end up even making a difference in this police precinct? Or do these people just get super pissed off and go after this guy? Like, it made me realize, like, I do want to see more of this. I don't know if we're going to get to, but I would like to see more of this because I think that there is a story. And I think also, you know, especially unfortunately where we are today with everything going on with police corruption around the country and basically around the world as well. That it is a very valid story. And the one thing that like it made me realize, like again, going back to the Saw movies, and you mentioned like Jigsaw's sort of modus operandi, is he's really terrible towards addiction. Like he treats addiction as a thing that like you can just immediately turn your back on and turn your life around without any sort of like real healing. Like I saw somebody on Twitter joke, like, how many people might have actually come out of the Saw movies better if Jigsaw just sat them down and been like, you need therapy. Like, you don't need to like dig a key out of your eyeball. What you need is like 3 weeks of therapy. And so it is kind of dismissive to a lot of mental health issues in a way that does feel a little destructive. So I like the fact that Spiral is something totally different and is addressing something that can be fixed. I don't know how you fix it, but it can be fixed. If they do get to come back for more, I mean, I'd almost like to see Chris turn and be like, okay, like, maybe we go and find this kid and be like, okay, how do we do this? Or I don't know. But I'd like to see it furthered.
My only real issue with the movie was just how easy it was for me to guess the killer, which means if I do watch it again, I'll enjoy it even more because I'm never surprised again. It's not like I would have forgotten, oh, it was him.
Yeah.
But, so the next time around, that won't even really be an issue. And, I'm down. I mean, fuck dirty cops, fuck corrupt cops, like that was the other thing too. It was just like everybody that died in this movie kind of had it coming. Which hasn't been the case for a while. There's certainly, like I mentioned before, in like Saw 3D, like Bobby's wife and a couple others that, even in Saw 6, which I really like, it's just like, I don't get what either of those people did wrong. Like when he has, William in the trap with kill the old lady that's got a family or kill the young, healthy guy that doesn't, it's just like, well, neither of them did anything wrong.
Yeah.
His whatever you call it, dog pound, the 6 in the carousel. It's like, sure, they suck because that's their job is to find reasons to like send people to their grave, basically. But like some of the people in Saw 6 really did nothing wrong.
I always wondered.
So I liked that this, like, I never once in this movie was like, oh, not him. I was just like,
yeah, get him.
Although it was a little awkward with the first cop because you don't know that at the time. Like he seems like a pretty great cop because he's like going above and beyond to catch a purse snatcher.
I'm never going into a sewer to go find a purse snatcher. That's just
it's like, wow, that's one dedicated cop. And you don't know that he's Rock's partner or anything. So it's like you don't really have any reason. You don't know anything about this guy, and it's you got to open a movie with a trap and somebody dying. That's one thing, But he was probably the closest one to like somebody who didn't fully deserve it, and like even when his crime was like lying on the stands or something. But is he just like putting away innocent people, or was he just like he doesn't have the evidence, but he knows this guy's guilty, so he's just gonna make sure it goes the way it needs to go? Like they didn't really clarify that, and so. And the other guy we saw him like shoot somebody point blank, and then the other partner, the guy that was in the church, he was obviously guilty of shooting somebody else that was unarmed, trying to cover shit up, but they never quite established what that first cop's, if he was like truly dirty, or if he was just making sure the system didn't work against him, kind of thing. Which could be like a gray area, but even that could be kind of interesting on its own to explore if they wanted to.
Yeah. Also, what's interesting, and maybe you know this better than I do, because we were trying to think about this, but we were going back to like the original Saw, and I get why Gordon's there. I get why Adam is there, and everything. I never. Oh, I think we. Yeah. Oops, sorry.
I know why Adam was there.
Yeah, we know why Adam was there. We know why Gordon was there. Zepp to me seems like such a sad person to be stuck in this scenario, because in that one scene we see him like he's the only person that's like speaking up for John. So like why would John basically put him in the middle of all this? And I guess it's, maybe, I have to stop nitpicking things a little bit and letting my brain work overdrive. But I always wondered, like, what did Zepp do? Like, was that something that maybe was in the script that we didn't see? But like, I just feel bad because he was just a janitor who cared about the patients.
Yeah. Did he like molest a coma patient or something like that? Like, was it some weird thing like that? Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I can't remember.
Yeah, because like the only real scenes that we see him in until he's revealed to be the one with Monica Potter is basically him, correcting Dr. Gordon when, Gordon's just, casually talking about John Kramer's illnesses. And he's like, his name is John, and he seems like the one dude in the whole movie who actually cares about somebody else. And I was just like watching it. I was like, oh, poor Zepp. Like, he didn't deserve any of this.
The Zepp wiki says that John considered him to have issues of his own, as Zepp secretly talked about the doctors behind their back, saying that they're all having affairs and calling Dr. Gordon a cold-hearted bastard. Wow, man!
But it's true.
That's enough to get under shit. We're all in trouble.
Oh my God! I'm gonna wake up like one day and I'm gonna be stuck in some sort of crazy trap.
Fuck.
Oh, we are in trouble now.
Right now, shit.
Dude, if there was a jigsaw that went around it was like targeting the horror community in Los Angeles, we would all be screwed. Like every single one of us.
He'd have to do like mega traps, like the carousel and that other one in 3D with like the car or like the Lincoln Park guy and stuff. Like just like he's like, I'm not doing. He's like, I just got to get numbers up high because I don't have time to design this many traps. Jesus.
And then it turns out all along it was just Costas. It's just some of the things that they sort of target people for. Like, I get it, like in 2 and in 4 to a degree, like I get it, but like some of these things, like where I'm just like, oh, she was a terrible girlfriend, like, is that worth killing somebody over? Like, I mean, it's a cautionary tale. I try to be a good girlfriend, but like, is that worth like eviscerating somebody in a public space like that? Like, it's interesting, but it's all entertainment. But I think the fun of the movies is just getting to overthink these things, and and I kind of miss that. I miss having it every Halloween, and I miss getting to like drive home and like theorizing all this like BS about like, oh well, maybe it's this or that, and I mean, as terrible as Saw 3D was, like, I was excited at the end because I was like, all right, Dr. Gordon's here. We're going to get into some stuff. And then it was like, nope, sorry. So sorry, Carrie Elways. It's crazy to me that like these movies, here we are 17 years removed from almost 17 years since the release of the first one. And, we've got a spinoff now. It's crazy that we've had this journey. Do you feel like if you were in one of these traps, do you think you'd survive?
No.
Would you just take it willingly and sit and just like sort of just say your prayers, think about your family, just let it take you, or would you try?
Well, it depends what kind of. If I could, if it was one I had to save myself, I think I'd have trouble because I don't think I had the mental fortitude to like cut off a pound of my own flesh or hack off my own foot or whatever. I would hope I would survive if it was one of the ones like Rig or in 4 or Jeff in 3, where it's just like there's more on him to do something. I would hope I could just be persuasive enough and not just yell at them the whole time. Fuck you! Come on, you're gonna save me. I'd be like, all right, I think the key's over there.
Yeah,
it's funny. Like no one ever really survived. Like even when they do the right thing, like they're always too late. Like that was like one of the few things that they really kept tradition alive in Spiral. Like he does everything he can to save the old partner in the glass trap. He's just too late. Like he takes a bunch of injuries of himself. Getting shot up at the glass, and he uncuffs him, but. It's too late. Dude's already dead.
That seems like a very hazardous work environment too, in general.
Yeah. It's like, do they always shoot things out, or do you just bring it up that way? I do like that. The traps were a little. I don't know what the word is. They're a little like not amateur, but just like dialed back. But I like that because
They're not John, because he was like an
John was a
engineering
fucking
guy.
engineer who was like sitting like on his leisure time, like looking at catalogs of screws. Like he, he knew that shit. Like Max Minghella not going to know any of that crap. So I like that the traps are like a little bit like basic, I guess. I can't think of the word. There's definitely a word, but it's just not coming to me right now.
No, I know what you mean.
Fully understand what the guy and the finger one had to do, because it seemed like the machine was pulling his fingers off for him, but that was what he had to do to free himself. So I wasn't quite sure how that one was working.
I think that was one of the traps that ended up getting edited down a little bit for gore and stuff.
Okay.
So maybe there might be a little bit more to it than we saw in it.
Like pulling him up to that thing, and it was like, but if I understood, like to free himself, he had to let it take his fingers, and then he could just get up and walk away, because that was the only thing kind of tying him down. But the machine was already doing that, so I was just a little confused. But yeah, maybe the gore kind of cut it up.
Yeah. When I talked to Darren about him, he actually said a lot of the traps were inspired by BDSM, which is interesting, because I think even the setup that Sam Jackson has was like a real BDSM rig that they just bought, where it was like,
okay.
Where they like hoisted him up like that. And I was like, that's interesting. So, but I guess the tongue thing is apparently something that goes on in those circles as well. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I realized though, I was like, as I was watching this, I was like, I'd be dead. I just would be like, whatever. Like I might be able to do the Shawnee thing and just stab a guy and pull a key out of his intestines, but cutting my own eye to get a key out, like, screw it, man. Just kill me.
I'm always just like, no.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to die a horrible death. It's just time to make peace and go on. And then haunt everybody when I'm gone. So, well, I know we've dug into stuff for a while now. And I'm really glad you're able to join me on this Saw and Jigsaw journey. Hopefully, like, I know as obvious as everything sort of ended up being in this movie, I really hope we get another one. I want that tradition back. I'm a traditionalist, and I don't know. I want to be able to talk about all this kind of stuff every year again. So we'll see how that goes with like maybe VOD will bring it back.
Yeah, I know they're talking about like a TV series and stuff. And, there's definitely other ways to continue it in some form. So I don't think any franchise, especially when this big, ever truly dies, unless it's a legal matter like Friday the 13th. There's always going to be something kind of cooking, and I hope that they figure that out, because I'm definitely down for more. Like I said, I like this movie a lot, and I'm like you, I kind of want that tradition back, but I also just wish, I hope that there's a way they can start surprising me again, because they haven't since Saw 6. Saw 6 is the last one that there's always this like that moment where it clicks and I get kind of giddy, and I'm always just like, holy shit, I just figured it. And like, it's probably like a minute at most before they just reveal it in the movie themselves. But at that point, I feel like they've done their job and they got me. And it's not even always the case. Sometimes I really don't figure it out until they say so. But there's that moment where like it just starts to click. And I remember in Saw 6 where I realized what was happening, that the kid and the lady were not the guy's family, that they were George Newbern's kids family. And like, I think it was like 4 seconds before they said it in the movie. It's just like, I get that sort of like, that's awesome. But that hasn't happened now at the last 3 movies, like Saw 3D. I forget, as soon as Carrie shows up in that freaking stupid Survivor meeting early on, I'm like, okay, so Carrie's working with Jigsaw now. And like, that might've worked if they didn't have him in the movie until he pulled the mask off.
Or if they hadn't shown him in the trailer. Cause I remember like they had a late trailer for that movie that came out like about a week or 2 before the movie like came out in theaters. And there's like Carrie Elways in the trailer. And I was like, why would you do that?
Yeah. It's like, if he's going to come back, it's not just going to be to like be in these thankless, stupid scenes. Like, he's obviously working with Jigsaw, but like, you hide that until he's actually reveals himself as be working with Jigsaw. Then you throw in those flashbacks of like how it worked, or whatever. This is like, that would have been enough, and it would have been awesome. But then Jigsaw didn't even really Jigsaw, I figured out pretty quick that it was a 2 timeline thing again, because I noticed that they weren't showing the bodies in the present day.
Yeah.
But also I was like, how is, like, this game's only 90 minutes or whatever. How the fuck is whoever Jigsaw is this time around? How the hell are they getting around the city to string all this shit up while the game's still going on? Like, it seems like a fucking monumental task to pull off.
Yeah. The other thing that sort of bothered me about Jigsaw too is that he knows that his neighbor murdered her baby.
Yeah.
And never tells anybody. Like, she murders an infant and he's like, no, I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is
survive. I'm going to put you into a trap game and hopefully you'll get killed because I'm not even guaranteeing that.
Yeah. So that to me always really bothered me. Like that like is at the point where I'm like, now John Kramer is culpable in somebody else's crime.
Yeah.
Because he knows what she's done.
Yeah.
And he doesn't tell police or anybody. He's like, I'm going to deal with it. And it's like, I don't know, man. That's a pretty harsh thing to just sort of sweep under the rug. Like, it's, it's not somebody having, like, being addicted to, painkillers or whatever, or prostitution, which again, it's like these things that you're just like,
these are vices.
Yeah. Murdering an infant is a whole different level. So,
and then, but also, I would like a Sparrow too, because they do establish in this one Sam Jackson with a mustache in the flashback scenes, and so you can even get Sam Jackson back by having it at least part of it set during his time as a cop, and maybe that's how you could even start to tie in the other shit, because he obviously had familiarity with that case, so it's like maybe he was the one that investigated Hoffman's disappearance from that precinct, because they didn't want anybody from their precinct to deal with it. So it is the same city, right? Metro City or whatever. Maybe he crossed paths with Gordon or one of the other disciples at some point. So it's like you can tie in that stuff with what they already established and still get Sam Jackson back, which obviously is going to bring in a certain interest that might not be there otherwise. And
if somehow you can de-age Chris Rock and you have him like super young rookie as opposed to the
I love that. Yeah, they give that backwards.
Scenes.
They give a backwards baseball cap for 10 years ago. The man is 55 years old. The young version. Yeah, he's 45 then. Like, what? That killed me. But Sam with his mustache, I thought was hilarious. Because they give it, they tint the scene differently and shit. I'm like, is this the 70s? Like, what the fuck? How far back are we going?
So I think what we've established here is that you have to write Spiral too.
I'd write it for free. Shit.
All right. If you're listening, Lionsgate, he will write it for free.
It'll make especially it'll make up for not sending me one of those sweet puzzle packages that people are getting.
I'm sorry. You know what's really funny though is that the little suitcase that they sent with the box is like the tiny version. Do you remember Turek's suitcase that he brought all the time with him? That silver suitcase? Do you remember his briefcase that he used to carry around that had the skulls on it?
No.
Okay. Well, he used to have this briefcase that had it was like a silver metallic briefcase with like skulls on it. Yeah. And he used to bring it to Comic-Con, I remember. And it totally reminded me of that. And what's even weirder is we actually have that suitcase or that briefcase. Brian bought it from him at a garage sale, which I don't know why, but Dan and Ryan were having a garage sale. And he like Brian comes home with like all this stuff, and I was like, "Why did you buy the briefcase?" He's like, "I don't know, it was cool." So
I do this. Ooh. I'm showing you a video. This is the safe that came with a Jigsaw promotion. So they have my address on file. And that came with a code for like all the movies on Ultraviolet or whatever the Voodoo, whatever the hell it is. And a jigsaw, an actual jigsaw puzzle, which obviously I was very excited about. And also a bucket. I'm not sure what happened to the bucket, but you put the bucket on your head. It was like, one of those like stupid, like take pictures of this for social media kind of thing. So I don't know.
I never got that.
Maybe my picture wasn't that good. They crossed me off their list or something. But it's like, send me fucking jigsaw crap. Send me some of this Spiral. I like Spiral.
I know. And you got to go to the premiere. I've never done a Saw premiere before.
Oh, really?
No,
Yeah,
I
I
never
used to
did.
worm. I used to worm my way in because I knew somebody with. I'm not going to name drop. Somebody with some involvement with the series used to get tickets and not use them, so
Oh,
I would get his
fancy.
tickets because he was not going to go.
Yeah, no, I used to just go and see them like with all the normies. So yeah, I never got to cover them.
uh,
Because I when I started, it was like Saw 5,
okay.
and some we always had back because this is back my Dread Central days, and I think Andrew always did the reviews for the Saw movies. So,
Okay. I didn't
but
get
I
all.
actually
I
was
got like
okay with it because
I
I
got
got to go on opening
4.
night.
I got 4, and then 3D and Jigsaw. For 6, they did something else. They invited some journalists to like this like little dinner with
Oh, yeah, I didn't get any dinner.
with Tobin and what's the girl's name? The girl that won the contest.
Oh, from Scream
Simone?
Queens.
Yeah. Is it Simone? Was that her name?
I'm
Like a
totally
little dinner
blanking.
that it was like 10, maybe not even, maybe like 7 or 8 journalists and them, and a couple of the producers. It was really nice, and they gave us the video game, which I still have, the Xbox 360 game.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And 5, I don't know what happened with 5. 5 didn't do anything for me. But maybe they saw the writing on the wall in that one. But I remember that one I went to the midnight show on Thursday night. This is back before they were doing like 7 p.m. Thursday night shows. They're only at midnight. And it was at the Dome, the Cinerama Dome, the ArcLight. And it was kind of funny to go to there for like the smallest, like least eventful Saw movie. One of the biggest screens I've ever seen in my life for like watching, mostly just watching what's his name from Gilmore Girls, Strom, just like looking
Oh
at
yeah,
files and
Scott
stuff.
Patterson.
Yeah. I was like, all right. But yeah, that was a tough one to get through at midnight. I stayed awake though.
Yeah, yeah, 6 was I think 6 was my first one. I was in LA. I remember they were actually talking because I used to come out here when I was still living in Chicago, and I was out for a few weeks in October 2008, and they were talking about. I remember hearing a bunch of people at Screamfest talking about them doing a screening for Saw 5, and I was like, oh my god! But I was nobody at that point, so I was like, well, there's no way I'm ever going to get into that. So I was a little bummed out about that, and then 6, I was told, no, you're not covering that one. And I was like, okay.
Uh-huh.
So, and then 3D, I think I was like, all right, fine. Well, if you took 6, you could take 3D because I didn't really want to waste the time writing review for that. So, but yeah, I do miss the every October-ness of it. So.
Yeah, it's just like, it just became part of the tradition. However, I ended up seeing it, whether it was the premiere, buying a ticket, it was always just like, it was like Christmas, or Halloween itself. It was just like part of the deal every year. It was just like, the quality of the film didn't really matter, and how I saw it didn't really matter. It was just like exciting to be part of the, joining in for the machine when it was lasting. And
Yeah.
I think maybe even, the lack of annual installments might be part of why Jigsaw and now Spiral aren't as exciting as they might have been otherwise, because I think a lot of it was just people kind of just, oh yeah, new it's October, we're gonna go see the new Saw like we did last year. People love their tradition, especially horror fans, but now it's like it's not the tradition anymore. It's hard to get back into that groove.
Yeah, I kind of wish they'd waited. Maybe they'll do a re-release in October.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, like if they were re-released Spiral in October, I would be there just to have that feeling again.
Yeah. Just like, why not? Theaters still don't have a lot of product. The studios don't have too much in the tank really, and they're not going to for a while. So it's just they delayed X number of movies, but they didn't make any during that time, and now they have to spread them all out while they get back into gear. So re-releasing stuff is, perfectly good way to plug holes, especially stuff that came out at a time when, not everybody can get to the movies.
Yeah.
And I assume that won't be the case in October. Christ, I hope.
I know, right? Although it's like, I remember this time last year, I was like, oh, well, by the fall, we'll definitely be back in business, and God, were we dumb. It was like, we were like this time last year, like, okay, Halloween Kills will be coming out in October. We'll get to go to we always have a music festival that's like a Halloween music festival. We're like, oh, we'll be getting to go to Escape and all this. And we're like, oh no, we were stupid. I had no idea. So, but yeah, I think it'd be kind of interesting to see a lot of these movies because because Candyman's coming out in August.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that like either it hangs in there long enough to be still around in October, or maybe, they'll push it again in October. But I know we're getting a lot of horror in the next few months. It'd be nice to see them just kind of, it'd be kind of cool to see like a lot of the stuff that's coming out in the next few months get re-released in October. I don't think, I think everybody's scared of Halloween Kills, and I get it, but there's 4 weeks in the month. Like, we can watch more than one horror movie in October.
Yeah, there should be one for every week, really. Because, horror fans pretty much go on the first weekend anyway, so it's not like you're going to be cannibalizing much.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, now that we could basically wrap up so you can go start working on Spiral 2. I'll go put a few calls in for you. see what we can do. But I think your idea actually makes the most sense. That's, it's like, instead of doing Saw 9, like bring them together and then move forward from there. I would be down for that.
Yeah. Then you could just have it as like the B plot in quote unquote Spiral 2, just to like tie up those ends for those people without having to rely solely on the idea of, bringing the old fans back. The A plot would still obviously be Chris Rock and Max in the present day, but you could have a B plot of Sam back then, doing something that maybe is related to what they're doing now, but also is just an easy way to fill in those gaps, I think. Seems to be the best of both worlds to me, but what do I know?
I know. What do we know? We're just horror fans. What do we know?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Brian, where can people find? Because I know you're doing you're working on a new book. I think I saw on Twitter.
Yeah.
Or are you?
Our site, Birth Movies Death, is no longer with us, or at least not really.
Yeah.
And there was a scary moment a couple months ago now. Time is very hard to track, where the site completely went down. It was gone. It was going to a 404 and like go to like a GoDaddy, this domain is available kind of thing. So I was like, oof. Somebody put it back. We don't know who, but I was like, all right, just in case, I'm gonna rescue all my articles.
Yeah.
And so I spent like a week or so like saving all the Collins scripts to PDF and kind of looking at them like nostalgic, and I'm like, a lot of these are still worth reading. Like I didn't do a lot of like of the moment kind of stuff. And I was like, if the site goes down, it would be nice to have a way for people to read these still. So I started kind of grouping them by topic and kind of putting an ebook together. But I was like, well, I'm not going to make people pay for something that they already read for free. So there'll be new Collins scripts in the book as well.
Awesome.
And it'll be cheap. It'll only be a few bucks on Amazon. But just, something to kind of preserve their writing and give people, because, like I said, like a lot of them they didn't have expiration dates on them the way a lot of web writing, unfortunately, does.
Yeah.
They weren't news driven. They were always driven by like, it was cool back in the 70s when we used to have killer puppet movies all the time. Here's, like whatever the hell it is. And I would just talk about that versus like so-and-so is remaking this. And this is why I think it's a bad idea. Because like, you write stuff like that and then that movie never even gets made, So it's like, that was a waste of my time. It was a waste of your time to read it. So I always tried to stay away from that sort of stuff, which, probably didn't help hits. But on the flip side is, again, I think a lot of them are still worth reading and still relevant in some ways. So there are a few dated ones I'm throwing into. There's one that I ranted about horror movies being in 3D. Too many of them. I think it was like written after like My Soul to Take. And I was just like, yeah, stop converting these movies. We don't need everything in 3D. It's just like, yeah,
And we still had
good.
a few years of 3D after that.
Yeah. That's like, I was like, just wait a little bit, BC. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Just be patient. It'll pass.
Yeah. So so I work on that, and then I do stuff for Fangoria, and I update Horror Movie a Day when I can, and then I kind of let the spirit of Colin's Crypt live on at the Screamfest site, screamfestla.com.
Oh, cool.
So if you're interested in Colin's Crypty kind of things, they're there. There's no name for the column. I just kind of pop in every now and then with whatever might come to my head. But since I'm doing the book too, that's just very very erratic schedule, I guess. They're not posted every week, that's for sure.
No, I get it. And I think also too in the last year, it's just, I think a lot of people, it's just tough to keep a regular schedule of anything.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, there's nothing going on, so it's hard to get it's hard to get those inspirations. Like, because a lot of times it would be kicked off by like a new horror release. It wouldn't necessarily be about it, but like a new killer shark movie would come out and it would inspire me to write about the killer the Jaws ripoffs of the 70s kind of thing, or whatever. It's like without those sort of inciting movies to kind of like get the brain working, it's hard to come up with stuff, especially the kind of stuff that I like, which is, usually kind of repertory anyway.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, I'm really glad we were able to do this. And I always recommend Horror Movie a Day, the book, to people because it definitely opened up my eyes to a lot of movies that I had either never heard of or had never taken the time to watch. And I don't get a lot of time to read books. But I was really proud because I read yours, and then I also read Elise's book on the Friday the 13th TV series.
Oh, nice.
Because I remember watching that show, but like it's such a vague recollection of it that it brought it back to me in like such a really vivid way. So, I like when books give me something for my time, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah. And I think Horror Movie a Day really did, especially because there's just so much in there. And it's one of those things when you're like, sometimes when you're a horror fan, you get a little arrogant. You're like, oh yeah, I'm cool. I've gone through all these things. And then you read I'm like, oh, well, there's like 57 movies now that I have to catch up on. Okay. But it gives you homework in a good way. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I really appreciated about it. Cause even for as much as we all like to think we know about the genre, there's always more to know.
Oh yeah. And now I'm in the same boat. I mean, like this Shudder's adding stuff every week. And I'm lucky if I get to one movie a month.
Yeah.
It's like the backlog is just growing. Right now, I need somebody to do what I did, like write a book of like picking out a couple hundred titles that are worth checking out, because there's just a lot to sift through, and I hate when I watch them. I was like, well, that wasn't that good. Yeah, but
yeah. My favorite is like when I'll start watching a movie from like the mid 2000s to like the early 2010s.
Yeah.
And then I'll realize I was like, God, this feels familiar. And I'm like, oh, you dummy, you reviewed it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
I've rewritten the review, like even making the same points. And like, you think that at that point, when I
would
write
click, right?
It would start to like, oh wait, I think I've seen this. Nope. Yeah.
So,
that happened a few times last year.
I think all of us are still just coming out of this like fog also of the last 14 months where, I'm trying to, especially like the last couple of weeks, because it just seems like so many things are like coming through the pipeline where I'm trying to like be on top of things the way I used to be on top of things and failing miserably at it. And I'm like, oh my God, like last year was busy, but it wasn't like this. And I have to get myself back on track a little bit. So, but yeah, last year, I forget what it was, but it was like, there was some movie. I'm going to waste time even trying to think of it. But I was halfway through watching. I was like, God, this feels really familiar. And then I went to my blog. Thankfully, I used to log all of my reviews and everything like on my own separate blog. Mm-hmm. And I went and I did a search and I was like, oh yeah, you reviewed this in 2009. I was like, that's why it's familiar. And I was like, oh my God. So time means nothing. I guess maybe at this age that I'm getting to be, rewatching movies and not realizing I've already watched them is like, I don't know, it's almost like getting to watch it all over again for the first time. Who knows? So, but yeah, it's, what are you going to do? So, but anyway, now that I've sort of dwindled all of my ramblings there, where can people find you online? Because you're on Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, Brian W. Collins on Twitter and also Instagram if you want pictures of my cats or something, or puzzles.
Everybody needs more cat pictures.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
Awesome. Well, for those of you listening, thank you so much for supporting Corpse Club. To find out more about us, you can go over to corpseclub.com for your daily news, reviews, and interviews. You can head over to dailydead.com or follow us over at Daily Dead News on Twitter. Thank you to our engineer, Brian, for making us sound great. And until next time, everybody, stay scary.